and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at, of course, a very important day that is observed every year since the year 2019, the Youm-e-Istehsal Day, which is important, especially in terms of the kind of exploitation that we've been seeing in legally occupied Jammu and Kashmir for quite some time now. But especially on the 5th of August 2019, we saw that the unilateral status was removed, and this is important especially in terms of the kind of actions that India has taken previously and then after this as well. And this change of status of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir unilaterally by India of course poses great question marks, something that was retaliated against by Pakistan very strongly, opposed in terms of the UN Security Council resolutions, in terms of the decision that was taken, and then of course the impact that this has had on the people of Kashmir. But unfortunately we are about 4 years from that day, and still there is no sign of any sort of consequence regarding the fact that India has made this decision unilaterally against the UN Security Council resolutions. And so it seems that perhaps it's not that difficult to go against them. And so this is important, especially in terms of kind of response that is required, the kind of accountability that is required, and the change that is urgently needed for the people of Kashmir. Adding to that, of course, there were many other measures taken, including demographic changes within the occupied territory. Of course, it is one of the most highly militarized zones of the world. And then, of course, there are numerous cases that we keep on hearing about from the occupied territory, unfortunately, where there is still no real presence of internet or media observers to actually go and report the kind of suffering that the people of Kashmir go through every single day. And so this day becomes even more important, the day of exploitation. And so for Pakistan to be able to highlight this and to extend the kind of support it has always extended to the people of Kashmir, morally, politically, and diplomatically, it is of immense importance that we talk about this day and that we understand what it is that the people of Kashmir need from us and the world. So for this and more, as always, in the studio, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. We've also been joined online by senior leader All Parties Hurriyat Conference, Mr. Altaf Hussain. Wani, thank you very much, Altaf sir, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And let me start with you, because of course you've been at the forefront of the struggle of the people of Kashmir, and we've been of course fighting together for the right to self-determination, but especially since the actions of the year 2019 on the 5th of August, when India unilaterally scrapped Articles 370 and 35A. This of course made immense difference to the lives of the people of Kashmir and the way that the world also was looking at the current status of the occupied territory. It seemed big news then when it happened, and there was a lot of reaction coming in from countries including Pakistan. But 4 years later now, it seems that the world has gotten used to it. Do you think that's the case?
Thank you, Son, for making me part of this debate. And I would like to say my regards to Mr. Pitafi and the other panelists of us. What has happened in the last 4 years and what happened on the August 5th, we all have discussed it very well, that the Indian action was unilateral, it was illegal, it was against the spirits of the United Nations Security Council resolutions on Kashmir. It was also against the spirits of the Indian Constitution. It was even the rules and procedures of amendment of the Indian Constitution were not adopted. It was all done by politically motivated move of the BJP because it was in their election manifesto that they will abrogate it and they will abrogate the Article 370. They wanted to their agenda to further in Kashmir, the Hindutva agenda in Kashmir. So they did it at that time. It was illegal, and now it is being contested in the Supreme Court of India, and after 4 years, Supreme Court has taken it. But during the last 4 years, what India has did and why India did it, and we all know and we have discussed this many times, that the main motive behind this abrogation
Right. Wani, unfortunately, we're unable to hear you. Can you try again? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
The Indian government, the main motive of the Indian government was to change the demography of Jammu and Kashmir. They changed it by changing the domicile law in Kashmir. They did the delimitation of the assembly segments in Kashmir that favors the Hindu minority. They also had some other rules and procedures that are in favor of the the Hindus, not the Muslims. They disempowered the Muslims of Kashmir by all means, and then they also they took away the lands of Kashmiris, and now they are trying to sell the normalcy mantra around the globe. For that purpose, they arranged a G20 tourism summit in Kashmir, and then also a youth summit in Ladakh to sell the normalcy mantra to the international world. But I mean, I would like to say that some of the countries boycotted that, and many where the representation was very low. But the India was exposed that this normalcy mantra has not been sold as India wanted to sell it. Because when we go to the stats in Kashmir, what Indian government says to the international audience, what she says to its own audience, that there is a peace in Kashmir, that we have restored the peace in Kashmir, we have done a development in Kashmir, people of Kashmir are very happy, there is normalcy, there is no protest, there is nothing else in Kashmir. If there is peace, then the question arises, if there is normalcy in Kashmir, why India has about 900,000 troops in Kashmir? If there is peace in Kashmir, why India has armored those troops with the draconian laws like Armed Forces Special Power Act? Why India has armored its NIA with UAPS so that nobody can speak, nobody can write, nobody can even think of expressing his dissent in Kashmir? If there is normalcy, why more than 785 people have been killed during custody in Kashmir? If there is normalcy, why the people of Kashmir are not being allowed to express themselves peacefully? If there is normalcy, why Mirwais Umar Farrukh is under custody for last 4 years in his house and he's not allowed to perform his religious rites? Why people of Kashmir were not allowed to offer the Eid prayers during these last 4 years? Why all the Kashmiri leadership is behind the bars in Indian jails facing sedition charges? If all is well in Kashmir, why the human rights defender Farrukh Parvez, whom the international community, whole of the international human rights missionary and the world-renowned influencers say that he is the human rights defender, not a terrorist, but Indian government treats him as a terrorist.
Right.
He is behind the bars.
Absolutely. Wani Sahab, I understand that all is not well in Kashmir, and I understand that it's not normal, whatever is prevailing over there. But does the world also, especially in terms of their action, they may know what is going on, sure, but in terms of the kind of interactions that we keep on hearing about, the way that so much time has passed by without any real repercussions for the consequences of the actions of 2019, it seems that it is slowly and gradually becoming something that is now the new normal. Do you think that is not true?
I don't think it's a new normal now.
Okay.
In Kashmir. Yeah, it is not a new normal for us. It has been for the last 76 years. We have been championing this cause. We have been telling the world. But at the international level, we have seen that the things are changing very fast. Now the international community, the big powers who are the movers and shakers of the global discourse, they mostly care about their economic interests, they care about their strategic interests, hardly care about the human rights or the pledges they have made to the United Nations or while framing the United Nations Charter or the Human Rights Charter. I don't see that is being done, and that is what has increased the India. Why India? That's why India is not going through the accountability standards at international level. It's getting away there because of its economic clout at currently. But we have seen in past when India was not economically good, and in future also, with the way the Modi is seeing the seeds in India or polarization in India, I think the bad days for the Indian economy and then for the Indian international standing are there.
Right. Faisal, when we look at the situation, I want to understand again what Wani Saab was saying. Of course, that this is something that has been going on for far longer than since 2019. But I want to know whether or not the measures of 2019 mark something fundamentally drastic or different than what has happened previously, and whether or not there has been any change in the circumstances of the people of occupied Kashmir, whether it be an increased suffering or not. But in terms of whatever dynamics existed, do you think that the actions of 5th of August 2019 mark a significant change in history?
Definitely, they do. If we, look at the one we used to call Riyasat Jammu and Kashmir, and of course later on it is obviously on the Pakistan side is Azad Jammu and Kashmir. It's free land. Of course, they have their own constitution, they have their own legislative assembly and everything. But if we look at across the border, it's Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. And as Wani Saab has categorically mentioned that previously there was Indian army, but the number gradually increased during the BJP government, and they were doing it for a reason, and that reason was that they wanted to go against the resolution 47, which is of United Nations and which requires a plebiscite within Jammu and Kashmir. So if we look at it now, the situation now is that they took the unilateral decision back in 2019, and to me, I think we always say that it is bilateral sort of conflict between Pakistan and India. Somehow after 2020, especially Galwan episode, Eastern Ladakh episode, we can say that somehow China is part of it as well. China being part of it, it is more important for the world to ponder upon it. Reason being, all of the three parties that are included in this, and they are the conflicting parties, they are, they have the nuclear bombs, and that's why I'm saying that it has a huge importance. And if we look at the unilateral decision by India, though BJP's government, they always had this stance against the Muslims, and of course Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir being...
Right. Faisal, can you clarify what you said earlier, especially in terms of the countries possessing nuclear bombs? I want to understand whether or not you believe that this is potentially a cause of escalation to that point, because up till now we've seen that there is deterrence because of that.
Exactly, it is. It's a nuclear flashpoint, and the world keeps on highlighting it, and that's how it is right now. And that is why the world needs to be extra cautious about the steps which are being taken by the BJP government, and especially with the help of Hindutva ideology, RSS. It is backing BJP to make these kind of decisions in which Muslims are obviously being the victims.
But can any one of these countries afford that? Why would they go towards that direction?
None of the countries can afford it, and I think things should never move towards that kind of war, where we expect that one of them would be careless about using their nukes. Of course, Pakistan would never use it, and we expect from the others as well that that kind of time never arrives where we have to go to a length in terms of war. Why I say war? Sana, we keep on saying that what is the solution to it? Of course, we have talked with India for a long time. Everyone wanted to talk to India because negotiating table is the only point where everything resolves, and we keep on highlighting that end of the day, even if there is a war, even the wars get resolved on the table. So if wars get resolved on the table, then why not conflicts starts getting resolved on the table before the war starts? Right now, the only solution, I mean, me as a Pakistani who have heart for the Kashmiri people and their sufferings, and day and night we are seeing that they are suffering because they are right now living in an open jail. Earlier, Wani Saab was highlighting the names of the leaders who are in the jails. To me, every Kashmiri living in Kashmir, in today's Kashmir, is in jail. He is in jail because he hasn't got the rights, he hasn't got free movement, he hasn't got freedom of speech, he hasn't got freedom of press. there is no human right which is available to them. To me, they are in the jail. So obviously my heart goes out to them, and I always ponder about it, what's the end solution, what's the end result we might head towards. And the only solution I see upon is that eventually we are facing, sadly we are facing such kind of India that does not believe in talks, that does not believe in negotiations. Then we might go towards somewhere where things should never go.
Right. And Farrukh, earlier also when we were discussing, Wani Saab said something in terms of the way that whatever India has done has been exposed, and the world has seen what India is capable of. Of course, we've had different propaganda campaigns earlier also being exposed. But in terms of exactly what that means in tangible terms, especially in terms of the way that the things need to be highlighted outside of the occupied territory, is that a matter of how much exposure exists currently coming in, especially from the illegally occupied territory, or the fact that irrespective of sufficient exposure, there still seems to be other indicators guiding action or consequence?
Right, Sana, and I thought that you're going to ask me an international question, but I first wanted to actually bring the attention back to how India is treating Kashmir, especially India under Modi. When recently I started saying that I don't want to actually, dedicate any bandwidth to what India is doing to its own minorities. At that time, I particularly, spelled out a caveat that doesn't include Kashmir, because Kashmir is an international disputed territory. The people there are our people, and they have had enough. But there are three layers of what has been happening in Kashmir. One, Kashmir or Indian illegally occupied Kashmir under Congress rule or previous rules. When also there was huge violence and human rights abuses. But after that, we have seen that when Modi government came in 2014, they came up with the clever idea of using pellet guns on unarmed civilians, and that actually resulted in loss of eyes among children. From that to a child sitting, an infant actually sitting on the dead body of his grandfather. We have seen enough when it comes to Indian brutality in Kashmir, and sadly that doesn't end. But in 2019, what exactly happened was actually not in violation only of international commitments of India, the UN Charter, the Shimla Agreement, and so on, but it was also a violation of India's own constitution, its own promise to Indian, Indian occupied Kashmir, that we will give you special status and you will always enjoy a right to statehood. So what did they do? They scrapped two articles, Article 370 and 35A. And the modus operandi was amazing, Sana. One, Article 370 says, especially its first clause says, that Indian president can change any other law and its application to Kashmir, but in consultation with whom? The Constituent Assembly of Kashmir. Constituent Assembly of Kashmir actually ceased to exist in 1957, and at that time, amazingly, because that was something that was very important, Article 370 up till then was thought to be a temporary fixture. But in 2018, Indian Supreme Court actually decided that now that article has attained permanency, because the Constituent Assembly, before it abrogated, it did not actually abolish Article 370 or recommend it. Now, because Constituent Assembly is not there, and you have to abolish the law or the particular act, what do? You went to the bare bones of hardcore heart of what you call Indian Constitution, Article 367, and you added a subclause there, that is 4D, I suppose. In 4D, they have actually changed the meaning of Constituent Assembly. that states that Constituent Assembly in Article 370 will be read as legislative assembly. So now the legislative assembly could have done exactly that, but unfortunately at that time there was no legislative assembly either, because in a power grab by BJP, they had abolished the government of Mehbooba Mufti's government, and after that they had first imposed a governor's rule, and after some time they had usurped even that power to the office of Indian president. So after that, what exactly did they do? The President of India, because at that time the BJP's government could not actually promise a two-third majority in both houses of the parliament, they actually claimed that because now Kashmir is a union territory, because of that, now Indian Parliament has the right to actually make those recommendations to Indian President. With that kind of malarkey, with that kind of manipulation and abuse of their own constitution, it was a slam dunk, Sana, that the matter would go to India's Supreme Court and would be immediately reversed because it was obnoxious. But then we saw what Indian Supreme Court did. Their Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi, many people call him Mano Ranjan Gogoi, but he eventually sold his soul to BJP, and now he is a senator in India. At that time, he decided he is not going to actually accept the cases on this matter. For 4 years, it has been 4 years now, Sana, and they haven't been able to approach the matter or offer justice. And now that finally India's Supreme Court has actually taken up the matter, expect no miracles, because right now India's that bulwark of a democracy that was once called Supreme Court of India or judiciary, that once stood tall, now is crawling on ground like an invertebrate. And if it is not dead, it is dying right now. So don't expect that, but it is a proof how Narendra Modi has changed the very internal dynamics of India's politics, that all those institutions that stood as a vanguard against any kind of encroachment of law or democracy, one by one have petered out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Farrukh, you mentioned Justice Gogoi, and it reminded me of Major Gogoi, who once tied Kashmiri people in front of his jeep to stop the stone pelters.
Yeah, and he was rewarded for that.
Exactly.
He was given commendation. And after 1 or 2 years later, there was, it turned out that that man was actually involved in illicit, smuggling and other trades. And even after that, he was not actually stripped of his rank. True. Because he had become a hero who had strapped an unarmed voter to the front of his jeep as human shield during elections.
Right, and Wani Sahab, these measures, of course, and these incidents point towards, of course, we understand that the different institutions put in place may be no longer applicable or no longer have the strength or the hope for us to move towards any sort of change within India. But then I want to understand what it is that guides the people of Kashmir forward in their struggle for so many decades and so many years. And despite the way that there seems to be a breakdown of institutions within India, what it is then, what is the route then that the people of Kashmir are looking towards for any sort of progress in the situation or to get what their right is and what they deserve?
See, Sana, we have seen for the last 76 years, or even before that, when the moment of Pakistan was there, the people of Kashmir had aligned themselves to the Pakistan, and they were part of that moment also. And since then, the India knows that after this partition of Kashmir, India knew that if there is a plebiscite, it was India which went to the United States, United Nations. But then India knew from the very beginning that if a plebiscite happens in the Kashmir, the people of Kashmir will vote for the Pakistan. That is the main driving factor in the Kashmiri struggle, which gives Kashmiri people the strength, the moral booster for them is the Pakistan, the people of Pakistan who have been at their back since last 76 years. That's how we are facing such a huge army of the India, such a brutal army of India, and such brutal repression. Because India from the day one, as we are discussing now, the BJP and RSS currently, but India's policy towards Kashmir from the day one was it was a majoritarian politics. What they were doing, majoritarian rule, they tried to inflict it, and the BJP and RSS, they criminalized it, they victimized it, and they institutionalized it, and then they tried to implement in Kashmir, and they are now implementing in Kashmir very rapidly. But at the same, the people of Kashmir have the resilience against it, and they are not ready to compromise. You see, the leadership of Kashmir, if you talk about the leadership which is incarcerated, which is in the Indian jails for so many years, and the kind of torture they are facing, the Indian government time and again has offered them too much to compromise, but they are not ready to compromise. When our leadership is not ready to compromise, our people are not ready to compromise, our youth are not ready to compromise, that gives us strength. And again, we hoped many times, we saw that international community will come to the rescue of the people of Kashmir, because it is the international community which promised the people of Kashmir the right to self-determination. But unfortunately, so far we have seen good statements from the human rights organizations, from the think tanks, from some of the dignitaries. But unfortunately, as I earlier said, the movers and shakers, they are aligning with the perpetrator. They are not doing justice to the victims.
Right. And Vanisa, when you talk about the international community, and of course you've talked about the support coming in from the people of Pakistan, and that of course has already always existed, but I want to know whether or not there is possibility or hope of support from the people around the world, including those residing in India, that without of course taking consideration of the way that there is a lot of clampdown or any sort of dissent within India, are still trying to at least talk about these issues and to hold BJP or the state accountable for their actions. Do we have some hope emanating from within India for a change?
You see, within India, when we talk about there is a lot of sympathy in the people in India, lots of people, but unfortunately, those people in India, you see the recent reports which came, the India is at the 65th number in the freedom of expression. All those people who use it to write, if you go by the newspapers, news channels, those are only perpetrating the propaganda of the Indian government, the BJP government. There are only 3 to 4 online newspapers or websites where you can see some sort of dissent. But all those people, they have been silenced by the government of India. From you talk of Gautam Naulakha, who was one of the leading human rights defenders in India, used to use. But even then, during these lockdowns, you see the concerned citizens of India, they visited Kashmir, they released the first reports on Kashmir when there was nothing coming out of Kashmir. Those released the reports, and they said that India has lost the Kashmir. Indian government has lost totally control in Kashmir, and people in the youth of Kashmir have no fear of being killed by the Indian army, because they think we have to resist the Indian army. So there is concern in India. I would say there are good people in India. They do think about it. But as currently, the way the Modi regime has curtailed the freedom of expression in India, you can't imagine that nobody in India can even imagine. You saw when our foreign minister was on a visit to attend the conference, Shanghai Corporation Conference in India, and he was even interviewed by a very top rank Indian anchor. But he was also trolled, though he asked very tough questions to the Mr. Zardari. But even then he was trolled by the Indians. So you can see that Indian media, all the organs of the Indian government have been taken over by the BJP and RSS, their ideology. That is how we see the other voices being silenced in India. And likewise, the international voices who raise their voice for Kashmir, they are also being silenced. Even the people like me and others who are outside Kashmir, creating awareness about Kashmir, advocating for the Kashmiri rights, we also face the same reprisals. Our families, our properties have been attached. We have the cases against us under UAPA, and that's happening over there. Even my 90 years father is being called to the police station time and again, and I raids my home time and again.
Yeah.
This is happening to each and every defender who is talking about Kashmir. That is a new normal now in Kashmir.
Right, absolutely. Yes, Faisal, you had a question?
Yeah, while Wani sir was talking about, and obviously he talked about a very important aspect that is of trawling, and that is of the Bhakhts. Obviously, BJPs and RSS goons, they have their gangs ready always to anyone who is voicing against the government or voicing in favor of Muslims within India or in favor of Kashmir. Basically, anyone who talks any sense, they always go against him, and mobs, they treat him very badly. Why is happening in today's India? If we look at today's India, people who matter the most, I'm talking about the people who used to be considered as unannounced establishment that always was around to make things clear for everyone, that we are always there to fix everything. I'm talking about the Supreme Court of India. I'm talking about powerful army India has, a very large army India has. It's Chief of the Army Staff. If we talk about Chief of the Army Staff, General Pandey, me, you and Farrukh bhai, we have highlighted it time and again, the way he was made Chief of the Army Staff. We very well know that he had Ashirbad, or somebody was having his hand on his head from within RSS, because he hails from Nagpur, and RSS headquarter is in Nagpur, and that is why he became Chief of the Army Staff in India. So if they are having that much of influence that they can choose a person to be right on the top from within one of themselves, and if we talk about judiciary, so many judges, they are termed as having favors from RSS, having favors from within BJP. So it is a mindset that is controlling today's India. It is a mindset that does not want sanity to prevail in India, and that is why whenever we find a very tiny voices, sane voices from within India, suddenly they get shut by all of these gangs and mobs which are trained to silence these voices.
Right, but Faisal, haven't we seen previously also in other parts of the world that that's always the case whenever there is a lot of pressure or a lot of action taken from the state or the political parties level, where such dissenting voices are curbed, that there are of course a few small voices that are in fact curbed, but over time people who are resilient, they gain more and more voices join together to create a sort of change. I understand that it's a battle with lots of costs to pay, and that's something that will benefit us in the long run, but it has been decades and there is a lot of time that's already gone. Shouldn't that also be a way forward in terms of actual change?
Well, you have brought in an excellent question. It would take me to one of my thoughts that I always think about every society. Good and evil exists within every society. What happens is gradually good always maintains itself and it overcomes the evil. But in today's India, sadly, I'm not saying that the whole India is embodiment of evil. No, I'm not saying that. There are good people, there are good voices, but they are too tiny in number. In terms of numbers, if we talk about, the evil persists everywhere.
And how will that change? How will the numbers increase?
Somebody from outside, they would make them change it, because if we look at today's India, of course, good is so tiny that it would never be able to try to increase itself so that the evil can get down in India. But obviously, somebody from outside, they
outside
will be
of
the
India,
ones.
you mean?
Yeah.
All right. Farrukh, and I want to explore that further, especially in terms of the role that Pakistan has played over the years and can play possibly in terms of such change, and also internationally, what Faisal was referring to earlier, especially in the way that other countries may also be involved in this dynamic. And I know he mentioned China, but then of course, at the end of the day, whenever there is the talk of the issue of Kashmir, it comes down to the two countries. And earlier also we saw a statement coming in from the US about dialogue and encouraging dialogue between two countries, and I understand that that may be a good rhetoric for a third country towards anybody else in conflict. But in terms of this particular situation and the way that the human rights violations have existed over the years, what possibly can be the role that these countries can play, given the fact that these are violations of UN Security Council resolution, and so perhaps beyond a bilateral matter?
Right, Sana, and that is again a very good question, because it actually cuts to the heart of the problem. Earlier when Faisal was talking about nuclearization of Kashmir issue, and at that time it was also pointed out that because of Galwan and others, there are now 3 parties to Kashmir. Actually, it was essentially Modi government's August 5 decision that caused that. What they did was actually they stripped Jammu and Kashmir of its statehood, its autonomous status. The second thing was they actually bifurcated it into 2 territories, right? One is very much adjacent to China, and because like our Shimla agreement, where it was agreed that there won't be any unilateral change of status quo, there were agreements between China, or tacit agreements between China and India also, that the status of Ladakh will not be changed. The day India actually changed that status, it went actually on steroids when it comes to, actually on, not steroids, actually on acid, when it comes to trying to placate the local population and try to build infrastructure there. That also created a kind of face off with China, because most of that boundary is not demarcated, and it is always a matter of control. So with that kind of a situation, it was clear that it is going to be a nuclear flashpoint. But let me give you an example of what actually a nuclear flashpoint entails. Pakistan, of course, doesn't have the kind of conventional power that India has, and India is a rich country. So what happens? Indian media, Indian punditry, their retired journalists with whom many a times our friend Faisal shares screens, they actually keep on inhaling one propaganda of their own, that under the nuclear threshold, they can get away with anything. So what they did was, first they actually claimed that they had actually gone on with surgical strike across the LOC in Pakistan, Pakistani administered Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Then they also came up with their, aerial strike that we saw post Pulwama as well. With that kind of a situation, guns are usually jumpy, and there's always this fear that India might not actually inhale its propaganda and end up doing something that is so big in magnitude, like trying to take over a huge chunk of territory, that it becomes difficult to evict it. So at that time, there's always the chance of some kind of nuclear, response. And while every country will say that they have just kept the nuclear bombs just for show deterrence or show, that is not true, Sana. They exist for a reason. So this is the fear. And because now there are 3 international parties and then the Kashmiris to the Kashmir dispute, the problem is with that kind of friction and anger, especially the kind of anger that Indian media keeps on doling out, with that kind of situation, there's always a chance that we end up with a situation that might destroy us all. Regarding international approach, Sana, I think that Pakistan has been, trying to advocate the Kashmir cause for quite long, and especially after August 5, 2019. But let me remind you of a very interesting movie called Bruce Almighty, where he is given the powers of God, but he is told that you can do whatever you want, but you cannot mess with free will. Now, the states, especially autonomous independent states, they have this mechanism that international order, especially if they are powerful, cannot intervene internally in their matters, right? Similar kind of situation here. While everyone actually agrees in principle that human rights are being violated in Kashmir and people are being abused, despite that, the fact that India has humongous financial power, and as was pointed out by Wani Saab, it keeps on bribing people internationally. But apart from that also, that India is a state and you cannot actually go for a kinetic change in approach unless you are ready for an international war. With that kind of situation, it becomes tricky. But humbly, my point is, when you actually, the art of diplomacy and advocacy, especially when it involves human rights, involves something very interesting. That you build a case that is so flawless, that is so airtight, that a person, if he stays silent, privately knows that they are guilty of ignoring their own moral call, right?
Yeah.
And with that kind of a situation, I think Pakistan has gone on with its, dossiers on Kashmir, on India's human rights abuses, its involvement in terrorism in Pakistan. And I think if you read those texts, you will be surprised how flawless they are. Then the problem is that our media doesn't seem to actually pay any interest, show any interest to the matter. Today is 4th August, tomorrow is 5th August. What is the topic that is being discussed on television? It is caretaker setup, what will happen in coming days, what happens to PTI, blah, 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 right? Tomorrow also, my concern is that some of us will talk about these matters, but most won't. So what we do as a nation is that when our state is really committed to highlighting the matter internationally, we somehow keep on trying to trip it as quickly as possible. If that changes, Sana, if we start acting as a nation and Kashmiri brothers and sisters are with us, we can really teach India a lesson.
And if I could add as well, with a disclaimer that whatever I say, it is my own personal assessment and analysis, how I see things in coming future. And I think India might have to take their own pills. Sometimes back, obviously, they used to talk about the defensive offense, keeping Pakistan busy on the Western Front. Now is the time that if India, needs to be forced to sit on the negotiations, then it needs to be hit where it really matters. I'm talking about the 7 sisters, Meghalaya, then Arunachal Pradesh, then Mizoram, Manipur, Tripura, all of these 7 sisters and their younger brother Sikkim. All of these places they have trouble within themselves, and somebody, if cashes on it, especially in terms of when we know that in Myanmar there is a place called Chinland. Chinland has become a Chinland, and it's not in the control of Myanmar right now. Of course, there are people who are demanding, and they are fighting for their freedom.
Okay.
That region is entirely, bordering with Mizoram and Manipur. And who knows, in coming days, something can happen there,
right.
and
all
of these separatist movements, they can get strength. And whoever gives them strength would be giving them strength.
I understand, Faisal. I also have to go to Wani Saab
very quickly, Sana, with
yes,
your
sir.
permission, I just wanted to, speaking of pills, I don't understand what is with Pakistani and Indian media pundits, that they end up strategizing on television. I don't understand that.
Right.
Right now, the topic is Kashmir. Let us stick to that, because there is a glaring human right violation there. You can actually, in privacy of your home or office, strategize and recommend whatever you want.
Absolutely. Wani Saab, what exactly is it moving forward that we need immediately for the people of Kashmir? We hope that we're not sitting here another year and talking about the same actions of 2019.
The nation need to do what we actually say. We say that we are with the people of Kashmir, each and every political party says, but when it comes to the political parties, their rhetoric statements we can see, but we have not seen them expressing the same views in the parliament, in the streets, elsewhere of even this when we celebrate the solidarity. You see, it was on government level, it was celebrated on 4th, not on the 5th. Because Saturday is a holiday, so everybody will have a holiday. So people will not sacrifice their holiday. So we have to think that if we really have a solidarity with the people of Kashmir, as Ms. Pitafi was telling, that what media is talking about. We have been discussing it time and again. Our media has failed us totally.
Right.
If I could say, it has failed us totally at international, because we blame Indians time and again. During the peak time, they speak against Pakistan, they speak against the Kashmiri freedom struggle, but we discuss something else, and our voice doesn't reach to the international audience in that way.
Right, absolutely, Wani Saab. And of course, if we truly want to be in solidarity with the people of Kashmir, we should be prepared to sacrifice more than just a holiday. And we are. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Thank you, Altaf and Wani, for joining us and being a part of the discussion as well. That's all that we have from the show. See you Monday.